Hello Yu-Gi-Oh players and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! In Business Casual. I am your host, the RJ Bezio, and today I am going to be kicking the regular show down the road a little bit, as opposed to Friday, which I guess is tomorrow, so those of you who really love the regular show, don't freak out or anything, it's going to happen tomorrow. But the reason why I decided to delay it a little bit was because I brought you guys what is, in my very humble opinion, a very cool deck profile. And the reason why I say that, in part, is because, well, I am the creator of this deck. Other than the two people at Dice Age Games who have adopted this deck and created their own versions of it, I am the only person in the world who plays this deck as far as I know. Don't freak out on me or anything like that. It's highly explosive. It's a lot of fun. It's very variable. You can play around with the different engines in order to fit your playstyle. And it's also very good. It tops all the time at my locals, or it did while there were people really playing it, and it's actually won at Dice Age Games a few times, so it's very good. It is my Machina Mash deck. Now, I suppose Machina Mash is kind of a misnomer since there are spell cards in here, but it plays a lot like a Mash deck. It plays a lot like a Trapless Agent deck, I guess. And the reason why I created it was kind of because of my Robo-Rabbit deck review, which you guys should watch. I made it a few months ago, and it was very cool. But what I realized was that the Rabbit engine with the normal monsters was a wee bit arbitrary. You really didn't need it in order to make the deck work. Now I'm going to do a quick run-through of the deck itself and my deck list. Now this is kind of a prototype version. And I'll explain that later, but I'm going to do the quick deck profile, and then I am going to explain to you guys some of the combos you can make with this deck. It's a very cool one. So there are two main engines in this deck. The first is the Machina engine, of course, which requires your 3 gear frames. This card is very cool. It's kind of your Stratos. It allows you to search and to protect your 3 Machina Fortresses. This card is like your major boss monsters. It allows you to utilize basically every monster in this entire deck, even if it's normally dead. This card runs over a good number of the cards in the game right now, and if you can't run it over, you can crash into it and kill it that way. There are a ton of 2500 attack point monsters out there in the game right now, so you can usually plus off of this card by summoning it and crashing into that 2500 attack point monster, you know, ending up destroying both of them by battle and then destroying another opponent's monsters. There are just tons of good things you can do with this card, and I'm going to stop trying to do all my explanations now. So then I run 1 Machina Cannon, so when this card gets in the graveyard, you can discard this card by itself in order to summon your fortress. Now, a lot of people, I realize, use 2 Machina Cannon, or more, I suppose, if they run the Machina engine, but I only run 1. I realize that it's searchable by Gearframe, which makes it great, but I feel that like it can get cloggy if you run more than 1, and I have other ways of summoning the fortress from the graveyard, namely this guy, Cyber Eltanin. Now, this is one of the other big boss monsters of the deck. There's a lot of utility you can get out of this card that I'll explain later. Basically, what it does is you can remove for play all light machine monsters from your graveyard, special summon it, and then it sends all face-up monsters on the field to the graveyard, which means it gets over Zenmaines, it gets over Stardust, your opponent can't Starlight Road it, so tons of good things you can do with this card, and it is a way of summoning your Machina Fortress. Now, there are other ways of summoning your Eltanin besides, you know, using another Eltanin, one of which is Cyber Dragon, which allows you to bait out Bottomless Trap Hole and, you know, gets over Ryo, and you can Synchro with this card, you can Xyz with this card. There are just a ton of good things that you can do with your 1 Cyber Dragon, and it also helps you to get over your Zenmaines. The second engine is a Genex engine. It starts off with 2 Neutron. Now, there's a version of this deck, and it's the version that's been topping that I actually like, and I'm going to try utilizing a little more, that uses 2 of this card, or 3 of this card. It's a little more of a turbo version. I'll explain it more later, but basically this card searches out your 3 big tuners, which are 2 Birdman and Salvo. Now, Birdman is like the MVP of the deck. It has combos for days that I'll explain in a little bit. But you can search it out with Neutron, and Neutron can't be Veilered since it searches at the end of the turn, so super cool things you can do with that. And then you've got your Salvo, which you use in combo with your 2 Dekoichis, which are not only a way that you can slow the game down a little bit and get a little bit of deck thinning out there, but you can also use it as fodder for Fortress and then combo it with the Salvo. The other version that my other friend adopted of this deck is a Salvo Dad version, which actually uses 2 Salvos and 3 Dekoichis, but it also still uses the Birdman. Then, because you're a Machina Mash deck and you don't really have traps, you got to use your hand traps. You got 2 Veilers to stop big plays. You've got your 2 Maxx C to capitalize off of big plays. And then you've got your 2 Tragoedias and your Gorz for OTK stopping. Now, every level except 9 is represented in this deck somehow, so you can almost always steal an opponent's monster with your Tragoedia, and there are just a ton of Xyz and synchro plays that you can make with this card, including, you know, copying level 7s in your graveyard, summoning a Fortress, and going for Big Eye. So tons of things you can do with Tragoedia, and then Gorz is Gorz. Moving on, since you've got your Chaos monsters, your Light and Dark, you've got to have your BLS and your Chaos Sorcerer. So that's a monster deck, or a monster count of 27. So I'm going to go quickly through the spells. I'm not going to explain them too much. You know, Duality, you don't special summon all the time, so it gives you more options. 2 MST, I'm considering running 3, but right now I'm just keeping the 3rd one in the side deck. And then Heavy, Dark Hole, and Reborn, pretty much your staples. Pot of Avarice, you run a ton of monsters, so you need your well, you can recycle them and get your +1 off a Pot of Avarice. Double or Forbidden Lance and a Book of Moon. I'm considering taking out the Book of Moon for a second Forbidden Lance when I get one. They both stop your opponent's plays and save your plays. So a lot of good things you can do with both of these cards. And then 1 Mind Control. Once again, you can synchro or Xyz with pretty much any level in this deck, so you can just steal pretty much any one of your opponent's monsters, and it works out. Limited Removal is your game stealer. Since if your opponent has 5,000 or fewer life points and you successfully attack directly with your Machina Fortress in the damage step, you can activate Limited Removal and win. You can also activate Limited Removal over a Fortress that's equipped with Gearframe, and the Fortress will keep the 5,000 attack points, and then you'll just lose your Gearframe. Then, because I don't run any other traps, I have to run Treacherous Trap Hole because, well, it's a free +1. So the extra deck I'm not going to explain too much. I'm just going to go over some essential cards. You've got your 4 big rank 3s. I just keep these in there because there are a lot of level 3s. Gear Gigant Cross. I don't really have to explain this. There are a ton of level 4s. There are a ton of level 4 machines. The card's amazing. Big Eye, once again, don't need to explain it. Just tons of level 7s. Steals your opponent's monsters. And then just random synchros because you can synchro so much with this deck. You've got your level 5s and your level 6. A ton of level 7s. Run as many level 7s as you like in this deck just because you can make them so often. I have 2 Black Rose because you can make it a ton, and clearing the field is great, especially when you've got that Fortress in hand. And then Scrap Archfiend and Genex Ally Triforce. Triforce, when you synchro summon for it with a Genex Neutron, you can summon light monsters from your graveyard, like your Cyber Dragon. You can even summon BLS from your graveyard if it was summoned successfully the first time. You can also summon that Neutron that you use, so this is a great card. And I would run the Karakuri model Bure. However, as my friend Andrew Cusinelli said, the only reason why I even believe that card exists still is because I owned it at one point. The card's incredibly difficult to find. Then I've got my 2 level 8s, then Mistworm, and a Chimera Tech. So some of the combos for this deck that I really love, there's combos for days with this deck. I can't even describe to you all the amazing combos that come with this deck. One of them, the vast majority of them, use some combination of Neutron, Birdman, Salvo, maybe an Eltanin, and Fortress. So, combos you can do with this deck. There are just tons of them. You can summon your Gearframe, grab your Fortress, discard for your Fortress, equip the Gearframe to your Fortress. Next turn you can unequip that Fortress or that Gearframe, bounce the Gearframe back to your hand with Birdman, and then summon the Gearframe again for another plus off of the Gearframe. Then you can re-equip it to the Fortress, or you can go for a level 7 Synchro with that Birdman, and then you can go for Big Eye. So tons of things you can do with Birdman. Even if you didn't go for the Fortress, or if you didn't want to wait that turn, you can get your +1 off the Birdman and the Gearframe by adding the Gearframe back to your hand with the Birdman, and then summoning the Gearframe again and getting that extra plus. Other things, like big combos you can do with this deck. Where did my Salvo go? I know it's in here somewhere. Gotta find that Salvo. Okay. One of my other favorite combos in this deck is you can discard Deco for Fortress, and then summon Salvo, bring back your Deko, synchro for 7 with the Deko and the Salvo, get a big level 7, and then once again you can go for Big Eye if you like. More crazy combos. If you've got your Fortress in your graveyard, and let's say you've got a Neutron and an Eltanin. This is one of the best setups you can possibly have in this deck, especially if you've got that limiter removal. You summon your Fortress, you let it go for the turn, and you add your Birdman to the hand. Then next turn, they're probably going to have destroyed your Neutron. You could have honested that Neutron if you really wanted to keep it on the field. I don't run Honest in this build, but I might run it in future builds using 3 Neutron because, well, it's really good. So you remove that Neutron from the graveyard once it's been destroyed, summon your Eltanin, clear the field. Your opponent can't stop it with things like Musakani or Stardust or whatever. And then you bounce that Eltanin back to your hand with the Birdman, discard the Eltanin, get your Fortress, attack your opponent directly, and there's not a whole lot they can do about it. If they've got the 5,000, you've got that limiter removal in your hand, you've basically won the game. Combos for days with this deck. There are other versions of the deck I'm going to quickly go over. You can run a Salvo Dad version, which runs the two Black Salvo and the 3 Deko. The only reason I don't like that version is because it's a lot slower than this version, but it's a lot of fun. You can go for the level 7 plays even more often than you do in this version. There's also the Turbo version, which does your 3 Neutron, your 3 Birdman, and then you run 2 Tour Guides for speed, and then the 2 Card Trooper to get over Ryo, and it also sets up your graveyard. So many cool things you can do with this deck profile. I really encourage you guys to get creative with it, play around with it. You can net deck it if you like. I really don't care about net decking, as I explained in my last video, just to get a feel of how this deck works. But it's a fantastic deck. I highly encourage you guys to try it out, and I will be giving you guys updated deck profiles for it in the future because it can only get better with things like Iron Call, and once Prophecy become a thing, you can include Karakuris and go for your Naturia Beast. There are just so many cool things you can do with this deck. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do. This is the RJB0 signing out.